This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. Okay, it's been like a week since I've had Fender Tone Master Pro, which I bought with my own money because I felt like it was, I don't know, the latest piece of gear, and I felt like it was important to, for me, at least for my curiosity, to check it out, do some comparisons with it and see where it sits. Of course, we're used to companies kind of these days saying a lot of things about what a unit might sound like, what it is like to use, but I think as users, we're probably fair to be kind of skeptical about bits and pieces. I certainly was and have been, and I think that's probably come across in the nature of the videos and stuff. But I've not turned it on for a while. I've sort of had a little bit of trouble maybe finding sort of my sound, whatever that is, with this unit. Typically, I don't find it that difficult to get sort of tones that I'm inspired by out of units. The Tone Master Pro, I feel like it took me a little bit longer than perhaps maybe like on a Fractal device, which are not as easy to use, it's fair to say, or on even a Hotone Ampero, or on a Helix now, but admittedly I had spent kind of years kind of figuring out bits and pieces with the Helix, and that has changed quite a bit since launch anyway. And the Quad Cortex as well. So I wanted to do a video today talking about things that I find like the Fender Tone Master Pro seems to do really well, or things that I like about it, or try and find some of the positives within that. So first of all, I do think this form factor is going in the right direction. I saw like the Headrush Prime came out, and that was a bit more Helix sized, and I think once people had seen the Quad Cortex, it was possible to have a powerful thing in a smaller thing. It then became a thing like, right, okay, well, why does this thing need to be necessarily massive? And, you know, there's plenty of people out there with big pedal boards and stuff, but potentially one of the reasons that you might go down the modelling route in general is because of factors like convenience, factors like it's, you know, possible to fly with this sort of thing, you know, those sorts of issues. And I guess this is also a bit of a complicated thing. Like, if I was buying a modeler now, it's not that obvious to me which route one should go down. So do you go down the Quad Cortex route? Because I think now they have really stepped up their game and basically got it to where folks were wanting it to be from launch, although without the plugins yet. You do have the desktop editor, you do have a pretty decent range of effects and amplifiers now, and you do have that capture technology in there, which I think for people is actually useful, particularly if you're new to the modeling thing and you think, right, well, I don't want to build a thing from the ground up. What if I capture my favorite amp or whatever I've been using? I can then start to play with that in the Quad Cortex. And I think that is a valid way into this kind of modeling, kind of profiling space. Do you go down the route of buying something like a Fractal FM9 Turbo, which again, form factor wise is a bit bigger than this? Do you go for something like the FM3 and, you know, bear in mind that that can only run 1 amp at a time, that sort of stuff? Would you buy a full Line 6 Helix at the moment? To me, it feels like, and it has felt like this for a while, that surely there's got to be something new on the horizon coming down, and then if you'd bought a Helix probably, and then in a year or so a new model comes along, you probably feel some way about that, which I guess is a whole thing around this technology anyway. So I think that the point is kind of at the moment it kind of sits in a space where, other than the Quad Cortex and the FM9, so I think it's maybe on par in attractiveness with those in some ways, but it's also benefiting from the fact that at the moment there aren't obvious choices. Like, would you buy an 8-year-old unit over this? Not necessarily. But for me, as someone who already had a Helix, then I wouldn't necessarily consider the jump. But that's enough chatty stuff. So things that I like. So I think this is the closest that we've got to something like the Neural DSP plugin experience. Now, they weren't the first to do this by any means, but I think they're the most high profile within the plugin space in terms of getting something that kind of looks and feels like the real world. There is a name for this, it's skeuomorphic. Now, Headrush kind of looks similar to this, but when you get into the actual models, you don't have this. I think there's a danger in some ways that this can look a little bit cheap in some ways if it's not done well, and to me I feel like some parts are more effective than others. So for instance, I think seeing an amp in that way is pretty useful, but seeing a delay in this way, much less useful. And I'll show you another thing here. For instance, within your kind of shimmer type reverbs, the pitch adjusting with the knob here is really difficult and imprecise, and you know, you have to scroll over to another page for these other parameters. I almost feel like there is some context where actually just having a list, if it's not based on a real world thing, might be beneficial. To me, that's like a question mark. So does everything need to be in this pedal format? Not sure. But I feel like this is as close as we've seen to someone taking that touchscreen idea and really kind of making it look pretty decent, like you see in plugins, and really nice animation and that sort of stuff that does kind of take you more into that space of feeling like you're tweaking knobs on an amp. Now, it's still obviously that digital modeler thing, and it's not perfect. I'm myself kind of on the fence about whether a touchscreen is the way forward or not. I think there's a debate to be had about that, to be honest. Certainly when you're on a gig, there's something to me that feels a little bit off about tweaking on a touchscreen. Now, of course, we use phones, tablets, all that sort of stuff all the time, so I know it probably is a bit of an irrational thing, but yeah, it just feels a little bit, I don't know, something feels slightly off about a touchscreen. And you know, if you're sweaty or whatever, and also some of the venues that I might play might be like a barn where there's dodgy floor and stuff. I did a gig with a Quad Cortex in a sort of barn sort of situation. In some ways it doesn't feel ideal in that way. So I don't know, let me know your thoughts about whether the touchscreen is the way forward. I actually did find some tones that I enjoyed here. This is one other little bit of a weirdness, like the mix on some of the delays, Leon Todd did mention this to me as well, is a little bit like that mix is high. So if I put it to 10, I have to go down to like 1 to get it to kind of step back out of the way. That tone in general is a lot closer to what I was feeling like I dig. So I've got a noise gate up front, a Timmy, and that's the Timmy 3. Then I got the Mark 2. So I got the gain like 7.5, treble at 4, middle at 5, bass at about 3, presence at 1, master there at 5, and then in terms of switches, I got a bright switch on, everything else off, and then the EQ you can kind of see there. I am having to run high cuts in the cab section, as I would on pretty much any other unit. Here it's a bit lower than I would normally go. I don't know exactly what their cab EQ slopes are like, but yeah, down to 2.8 here to kind of get rid of any of the kind of fizzy. Now, I think one of the really positive things, and one of the things that is a bit difficult to get your head around, still I'm trying to think my way through this, is the kind of preset switching element of it. So one of the things that we've done with a lot of other modelers that don't have gapless preset switching, so I think the Boss GT stuff does have this, and the Headrush does have this, but typically we don't necessarily see many people actually talking about the Boss GT stuff for whatever reason. I know Boss does have some marketing budget, as I'm someone who has benefited from it, but I don't think they have a big user base, or certainly maybe over in the East side of the world maybe there's a bit more of a user base, but over here in the West I don't really hear too much about some of the Boss stuff. I think a bit underrated. But yeah, this seamless thing, we're used to in Helix world using things like snapshots, or in Quad Cortex world you'd be using scenes, and also in the Fractal world we typically would be using scenes, although they've just come out with this seamless update for the Axe-Fx 3. I think it's going to require a little bit more of getting used to this approach, because it is a different thing. You can do this sort of thing on the Helix if you switch it down to being just one DSP chip, essentially, because the way this works is that you pass a preset essentially to the other DSP, and basically you can have 2 presets loaded and one then goes into the buffer, and etc. So it is a thing that actually takes like double the processing power if you're doing it in the way that Fender have done it, or if you're doing it in the way that Line 6 have done it. I think Boss do it in a slightly different way, where the signal chain is a little bit more fixed, and there are other elements, other ways you could do it. But it is a preset switch thing which actually does work really pretty seamlessly. You're not getting like trails that go bonkers or anything like that. So if I had this clean delay, it is actually preserving things in a really nice way. So the seamless preset switching is a thing that is kind of difficult to conceptualize in a way, and yeah, but I think it is a good thing. So this Silver Jubilee as well, I checked this out for the first time today. I've got it going through the Mega V30 cab. I kind of like this. I think it had quite a cool sound. And one other thing to talk about, I think, is that the effects that they've got included in here are probably better than most modelers that I've seen that are new to market. as in there's more of them. I don't know that the quality of them necessarily stands up hugely well, but for instance, we've got a feedback generator. So that's kind of a thing. Then I switch over to the clean channel of the Silver Jubilee here. The reverbs, there's quite a lot of them. I've not found stuff that I love yet. The cloud reverb. It's pretty cool. But we can also fit in a nebula, so this one I didn't love. Kind of got a bit of that metallic kind of out of tuneness to that shimmer. Then there's an actual shimmer reverb, which is not turning on. Don't know how that's happened. Wait, that's Celestial, that's why. Shimmer's over here, you Burke. Yeah, scrolling over to see the full signal chain feels a little bit strange sometimes. But that kind of is what it is. That shimmer was kind of nothing, but the Celestial is kind of nice. And so other things that I quite like about it in terms of drives, you've got a fair range of drives. Things like the Nashville overdrive that doesn't really exist in most of the other modelers yet, and a few fuzzes. There you are, two fuzz. So yeah, in terms of tones, I'm not necessarily convinced that it's doing all the things that I really love yet, but those are some of the things that I do like about it. Trying to be kind of, yeah, positive about some of the things. I think we've got quite a lot of effects. I think in general this screen is kind of the best representation of how you could do a touchscreen thing, and it doesn't necessarily look like many of the other modelers, so from that point of view the UI is fairly unique feeling. Of course we've got the rotary and scribble strips, which I think is the kind of best of both worlds, and always available looper, which is kind of cool. So yeah, those are some of the bits and pieces that I do like about it. Also, I think it was a good idea, this EQ, it will forget the global EQ that you've used unless you save it and retain it somewhere else. So I think that's quite a handy thing, because I've forgotten on other modelers that I've left a global EQ on before. But those are some of the things I like. Let me know some of the things you like if you want. I did have Wayne ask if I could put some of my presets into the cloud, so I'm going to figure that out. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Cheers!